45 ACP Semi-Wadcutter. So I did a test not that long ago where I tested some federal gold medal match 185 grain Semi-Wadcutters. And a lot of people were saying, hey, I'd like to see something better than that, because it was pretty much a very, very lightened load for competition, and it just didn't want to run in my my shield here. And I've tested it before in my Glock, and it did okay, but I mean, it's very, very low powered. A lot of people wanted to see a full powered version of a 45 ACP Semi-Wadcutter. So what I have today is our Black Hills ammunition. This is a 200 grain Semi-Wadcutter, lead Semi-Wadcutter, rated at 875 feet per second. So I'm going to use my 5.3 inch Glock 41 and my 3.3 inch Shield 45 to do this test. So different barrel lengths for sure by 2 inches. That's a big difference there. So we'll see what we get with these. So I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy I get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic gel test. So I'm going to go into plain 10% clear ballistics on our first shot here to see where our best potential is of those cartridges, see if, you know, what kind of penetration we get and all of that. Then I'm going to move on to doing more of a real world simulation where I have 4 layers of sweatshirt material in this first 3-inch piece that represents hitting a pectoral muscle, followed by a 1/4 inch MDF, medium density fiberboard, to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, then another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. Clear ballistics is roughly a half representation of the density of flesh. So when we do our real world simulation, 3 inches is more like 1.5 inches in real flesh, and 16 inches is more like 8 inches. Another note here, these blocks are stored inside. I just put them out here like 3 minutes ago, so they don't get cold just because there's snow on the ground. After sitting out here for a couple minutes, the results are not going to be skewed because they're not more dense or something like that versus summer. So just thought I'd make a mention of that. So I'll do a plain clear ballistic shot, then a real world simulation shot, and then I am going to see what kind of practical accuracy these things will have on steel. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up, we'll run that through my 5.3 inch Glock 41. We're rated at 875 feet per second. Let's see how close I get to that 875 feet per second. 838, 866, 845, 848, 821. So definitely quite a bit below that rated velocity, but almost no recoil in that. That was pretty nice to shoot. So let's see what we get here through the little 3.3 inch shield here. $699, 747, 746, 752, 795. Let me run one more. 724. Yeah, not super consistent there, but you know, at least with rounds like this in its thermal ballistics, it doesn't make a big difference if we get, you know, altered velocity so much, because we're not going to deal with any type of expansion, so it's not really that big of a deal. So let's start our ballistics gel block and see how this ammo does out of these two different guns. All right, first up, our plain clear ballistics shot. No rib simulation that could potentially slow down its penetration. No fabric in the way that could potentially clog a hollow point. I know that that's redundant in a test like that, but I still will stay consistent with that and put that up in my real world simulation. I like to stay consistent. But let's see what we get with our 5.3 inch Glock 41 and our plain clear ballistics shot. All right. Now let's hit that from our little shield here. Let's go take a look. All right, so interesting. It actually went further from the shorter barrel. That could just, you know, have something to do with some of the resistance. Now, one thing I see is that with the Glock shot, the bullet's backwards, and with the one from our shield there, it is forward. So there's a good chance that that one from the Glock tumbled, and that's why it went less, as where the one from the Shield just didn't tumble at all. So energy dump in this first 3-inch piece isn't bad. It's better than like a round nose. Not great though. So with the one from our Glock, we went to about 24 1/4. Parallax will sometimes throw this off and make it look like it's not going as far as I'm saying, but from straight on view here, we're at 27.5 with the one from our Shield. So honestly, I don't think these did bad at all. This is definitely over penetrating, but here's the thing, and I don't want people to misconstrue what I'm saying, because I get accused of contradictory things all the time because people aren't understanding what I'm saying. Normally, it is very bad to get over penetration, because generally I'm working with hollow points, and over penetration generally means you didn't get expansion. So very much over penetrated. It didn't dump its energy in the target right here. If it were like a tumbling style bullet, if it didn't tumble right and it went too far, these are all kind of failures. But this ammo is not going to tumble very, effectively in a short distance here. It is meant to cut straight. So semi-wad cutter, a wad cutter, rounds of that nature, it's going to do the same thing in here regardless. It's not going to tumble. So the fact that it happened to also over penetrate basically means nothing here. It would go straight here. If it were to stop, it would stop in here by going straight. But just because it went kind of deep doesn't mean anything. So these actually did pretty good. They did how basically a semi-wad cutter is designed to work. So let's put on our fabric, put in our rib simulation, and see how these do in our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation, 4 layers of sweatshirt material. I know that's redundant. Followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics that represents hitting a pectoral muscle. Followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard that represents hitting ribs or sternum. 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and then another 1/4 inch MDF at the back to represent hitting back ribs. If these bullets go about 3 inches past that back rib simulation, it would be an indication that they could pass through an average size individual. But let's see what we get here with our 5.3 inch barrel. All right. Now let's hit that with our 3.3 inch barrel. Let's go take a look. All right, so a little bit different results here, and that's likely because they both simply went straight, and one with less velocity is not going to go as far. So let's take a look at our first rib simulation here. And these are punching through nice and straight. That's perfect. If they were tumbling, that would really limit the overall penetration that we would get. So not bad performance overall for what they are. So with our one from our 5.3 inch barrel, it just punched through that back rib simulation. We went right to 20 inches. So that likely would not pass through an average size individual if we're talking actual ribs in there. So, that real world simulation tells you a little bit about, the real world performance. Now, the one from our little 3.3 inch barrel, that actually hit the rib simulation and then rolled back a little bit. So that is at 19 inches with our shorter barrel. So only really an inch difference in our real world simulation. So honestly, these are pretty good. The only thing that stands out to me at this point is not so much the ballistic performance, but that, through the little subcompact pistol, it kind of feels like shooting like a 9mm plus P through a subcompact pistol, as where through the Glock, it feels like shooting some sort of 22 or something like that. There's a very, very low recoil. So let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at them. Then we're going to shoot our steel and see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel. Here's the one from our 5-inch barrel over here. And here's the one from our 3-inch barrel. 3.3 and 5.3 barrel. Just abbreviate 5-inch, 3-inch. So not a big difference there in how those look. And I don't know if these are hard cast. They seem like they are, but they may not be. They seem very hard because they did not deform much going through our real world simulation. So there's our 5-inch barrel and our 3-inch barrel through our real world simulation. Not really much change to those at all. Look at the one going through plain gel versus our real world simulation. So pretty interesting, not terrible performance for what they are. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, 14 yards from the target. This is just our practical shootability drill here. So I'm just gonna get a front sight picture and pop these off as fast as I think I can hit the target from 14 yards here. See how these do. So here's from our 5.3-inch barrel. All right, not too bad. Now through our little shield here. Oh, see, the only other time I had a malfunction on this was with some semi-wad cutters and with one cheap round of hollow points. So let's keep going. All right, so it shoots pretty good overall, except it's just not reliable in this little pistol here. Just wanted to hang up on that edge. Yeah. So let me back it up from, I'm gonna do 75 yards just for fun. I haven't done that in a long time, and see how these things will shoot at some distance, because semi-wad cutters are really supposed to be very accurate. So let's do that. All right, 75 yards from the target, mostly just for fun to see how these things will shoot. So 5.3-inch Glock. See how this thing will do from 75 yards. All right, so hard for me to tell what I did wrong there. First shot, I missed, aimed at center mass, then I aimed at the head on that silhouette. I made some hits, but then I also made some misses, so I don't know. So our little shield here, let's see how this does. So with that, you know, the first couple shots I'm missing because I'm kind of experimenting with the holds to see where they're hitting. With that, when I aimed like low at the very base of the target, I made my first hit. And the rest of those hits, I was aiming at the very, very base of that target, as where with the 45, the 5.3-inch barrel, they aim up here. So just a big difference there on where they want to hit based on that little bit of shift in velocity, and there's other things that can come into play here. So looking at this, honestly, not bad ammo for what it is. Now, I would rule it out, you know, as a short barrel load, just because if my shield doesn't want to run that 100%, I can't imagine much other stuff running. I mean, a Glock might, because they have that wider feed ramp there than the shield. But, you know, I don't know. The Glock, though, my full-size Glock ran it just fine. So what I'm seeing here is it looks like, for me, I'm going to say it's kind of an interesting, neat load for the Glock. I might actually recommend that to somebody for self-defense, because, you know, it had pretty low recoil, very, very low recoil, actually. And it got really good straight line penetration. And these are all good things for, you know, self-defense. And it shot really, really easy. So it wouldn't be my first choice to somebody that's adverse to recoil. But if all they have is a full-size 45 automatic pistol, I think this is a good balance of just enough power to run that slide right, but still really good terminal performance for what it is. Now, with the short barrel, you know, a lot of people will say, well, that makes sense for that because a lot of rounds don't expand. I've seen a lot of hollow points expand quite well out of this pistol, and I just personally, I wouldn't carry something like that unless you knew it was going to run in your pistol, and it just didn't want to run in mine. So yeah, I can't imagine it running much better in other people's smaller compact pistols either. So interesting ammo. That's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.